In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold. The Abracast. Occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Please note the explicit content indicator. This means that I use adult language. I do not speak in a humorless, public radio hushed monotone. I am excited and enthusiastic about the information that I present and the topics I discuss. You will hear ice rattle in my glass throughout the show. On the show, I joke about bodily functions, sex acts, religion, and politics. The topics may seem random or scattered through the back catalog. A list of show topics in chronological order is provided on the featured topic link at Advertise.com. If any of these issues might trigger you, this might not be the podcast for you, and I wish you good luck finding a show more to your liking. It's that time again. The music is low. The party is over. The fire is dying down, and all the ordinary people passed out long ago. Now we are the only ones left. Getting ready to talk some serious shit. Share. All right, sorry. This is John. I'm John. This is the Advertise. Sorry, I was Instagramming. Thank you for tuning in. This is Wednesday. We're kind of shifting focus. So we spent a lot of time working through Thus Spake Zarathustra by Friedrich Nietzsche. And then we did a month of the Enchiridion by Epictetus, the handbook or the manual of Stoic philosophy. And today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're moving on down the road. We're still in we're still in the wheelhouse of Western philosophy, right? So look, I started this thing going, yeah, I don't really know a whole lot about philosophy. I'm taking myself to school, everybody. So before I tell you what we're doing and before we get, well, I mean, you already seen the fucking title of the show, so you'll know already. But go ahead and manifest your vessel of the art and raise it up. And let's thank the supporters of the show, both at Patreon and at Subscribestar. Let's see. Here's to you guys. Another day, another bender. No retreat and no surrender. The stomach's still a little queasy. I just broke the January Aberfast last night. So, yeah, forgive me. Here we go. Let's see. All right. So what are we doing this evening? Tonight we are opening Plato's Republic, and we're going to be talking about the Allegory of the Cave. And the first time I heard about this, it was in a discussion about Gnosticism, and maybe we'll see why here. So something about the structure of the this allegory. Plato presents his argument as a dialogue. Socrates is representing Plato's own views, speaks first, and then the respondent is this guy named Galliacon. So, are you ready? You guys ready have you guys ever heard of the Allegory of the Cave before? Let's see. Hold on, let me Scratch that. Let me remind you of what I have mentioned in the course of this discussion and at many other times. Glaucon says, what? Socrates continues, the old story that there are many beautiful and many goodly things, and so of all the other things which we describe and define, to all of them the term many is applied. Glaucon says, true, he said, and there is an absolute beauty and the absolute good, and of other things to which this term many is applied, there is an absolute, for they can be brought under a single idea, which is called the essence of each. Very true. The many, as we say, are seen but not known, and the ideas are not but seen. Exactly. And what is the organ in which we see the visible things? The sight, he said. And with the hearing, I said, we hear. And with the other senses perceive the other objects of sense. True. But have you remarked that the sight is by far the most costly and complex piece of workmanship which the artificer of the senses ever contrived? No, I never have, he said. Then reflect. Has the ear or voice need of any third or additional nature in order that one may be able to hear and the other to be heard? Nothing of that sort. No, indeed, I replied, and the same is true of most, if not all, other senses. Would you not say that any of them requires such addition? Certainly not. But you see that without the addition of some other nature, there is no seeing or being seen. Well, how do you mean, sir? Sight being, as I conceive, in the eyes. And he who has eyes wanting to see, color being also present in them. Still, unless there is a third nature specially adapted to this purpose, the owner of the eyes will see nothing and the colors will be invisible. Of what nature are you speaking? Ooh, do you guys know? What? Of course you know. Of that which you term light, I replied. True, he said. Noble then is the bond which links together sight and visibility, and great beyond other bonds by no small deference of nature. For light is their bond, and light is no ignoble thing. Nay, he said, the reverse of ignoble. In which I said of the gods in heaven, would you say was the Lord of this element? Whose is that light which makes the eye to see perfectly in the visible to appear? You mean the sun, as you and all mankind say. May not the relation of sight to this deity be described as follows? How? Neither sight nor the eye in which sight resides is the sun. No, yet all of the organs of the sense of the eye is the most like the sun, by far the most like. And the power which the eye possesses is a sort of effluence which is dispensed from the sun. Exactly. Okay, so here we have an instance of a as above, so below, as a microcosm, right? They're talking about how the eye resembles the sun. I gotta just take a note here real fast, sorry. I think that's worthy of note. Worthy of note. Then the sun is not sight, but the author of sight, who is recognized by sight. True, he said. And then then this is he whom I called the child of the good, whom the good begat in his own likeness to be in the visible world in relation to sight and to other things of sight. What is the good is the intellectual world in relation to mind and to the things of mind. Will you be a little bit more explicit, he said. I fucking will. Socrates says, why, you know, I said that the eyes, when a person directs them towards objects on which the light of day is no longer shining, but the moon and the stars only see dimly, and are nearly blind, they seem to have no clearness of vision in them. Very true. But when they are directed towards objects which the visible sun shines, they see clearly, and there is sight in them. Certainly. And the soul is like the eye when resting upon that which truth and being shine. The soul perceives and understands and is radiant with intelligence, but when turned towards the twilight of becoming and perishing, then she has opinion only and goes blinking about, and is first one of opinion, then of another, and seems to have no intelligence. Just so. Now, that which imparts truth to the known and the power of knowing to the knower is what I would have you term the idea of good. And this will deem to be the cause of science and of truth, in so far as the latter becomes the subject of knowledge. Beautiful, too, as are both truth and knowledge. You will be right in esteeming this other nature more beautiful than either. And as is the previous instance, light and sight may truly said to be like the sun, and yet not to be the sun. So in this other sphere, science and truth may be deemed to be like the good, but not the good. The good has a place of honor, yet higher. What a wonder of beauty that must be, he said, which is the author of science and truth, and yet surpass them in beauty, for you surely cannot mean to say that pleasure is the good. God forbid, I replied, but I may ask you to consider the image in another point of view. In what point of view? You would say, would you not, that the sun is not the only author of visibility in all visible things, but of generation, of nourishment and growth, though he himself is not generation. Certainly. I think this is where we're going to get into it, guys. In the like manner, the good may be said to be not only the author of knowledge to all things, but of their being in essence, and yet the good is not the essence, but far exceeds the essence of dignity and power. And Glaucon said, with a ludicrous earnestness, by the light of heaven, how amazing. Yes, I said, and the exaggeration may be set down to you, for you made me utter my fancies, and pray continue to utter them. At any rate, let us hear if there is anything more to be said about this similitude of the sun. Yes, I said, there is a great deal more. Then omit nothing, however slight. I will do my best, I said, but I should think that a great deal will have to be omitted. I hope not, he said. You have to imagine then that there are two ruling powers, and that one of them is set over the intellectual world and the other over the visible. Here you can see right here this the duality that's common in Gnosticism. The intellectual, or maybe the spiritual world, versus the visible, or certainly the material world. May I suppose that you have this distinction of the visible and intelligible fixed in your mind? I have. Now take a line which has been cut into two unequal parts, and divide each of them in the same proportion, and suppose the two main divisions to answer. One to the visible and the other to the intelligible. and then compare the subdivisions in respect of their clearness and their want of clearness. And you will find that the first section in the realm of the visible consists of images, and by images I mean, in the first place, shadows, and in the second place, reflections in water, and in a solid, smooth, and polished bodies, and the like. Do you understand? Yeah, I understand. Imagine now the other sections of which this is the resemblance to include the animals which we see, and everything that grows or is made. Very good. Would you not admit that both the sections of this division have different degrees of truth, and that the copy is to the original as the realm of opinion is to the realm of knowledge? Most undoubtedly. Next, proceed to consider the manner in which the realm of the intellectual is to be divided. In what manner is that? Thus, there are two subdivisions in the lower of which the soul uses the figures given by the former division as images. The inquiry can only be hypothetical, and instead of going upwards to a principle, descends to the other end. In the higher of the two, the soul passes out of the hypothesis and goes up to a principle which is above hypothesis, making no use of images, as in the former case, but proceeding only in and through the ideas themselves. I do not quite understand your meaning, he said. Then I will try again. You will understand me better when I have made some preliminary remarks. You are aware that students of geometry, arithmetic, and the kindred sciences assume the odd and the even, and the figures and the three kinds of angles and the like of their several branches of science. Here are their hypotheses, which they and everybody are supposed to know, and therefore they do not deign to give any account of them, either to themselves or others, but they begin with them, and they go on until they arrive at last, and in a consistent manner at their conclusion. Yes, he said, I know. And do you know also that although they make use of the visible forms and reason about them, they are thinking not of these, but of the ideals which they resemble, not of the figures which they draw, but of the absolute square and the absolute diameter and so on, the forms which they draw or make, and when have shadows and reflections in water of their own, are converted by them into these images, but they are really seeking to behold the things themselves, which can only be seen with the eye of the mind. That is true. And of this kind I spoke as an intelligible, although in the search after it, the soul is compelled to use hypotheses, not ascending to the first principle because she is unable to rise above the region of the hypothesis, but employing the object of which the shadows below are resemblances in their turn as images, they having in relation to the shadows and reflections of them a greater distinctness and therefore a higher value. And I understand that you are speaking of the province of geometry and the sister arts. This is Socrates. And when I speak of the other divisions of the intelligible, you will understand me to speak of that other sort of knowledge which reason herself attains by the power of dialectic, using the hypothesis not as the first principles, but only as hypothesis. This is to say, as steps and points of departure into a world which is above hypothesis, in order that she may soar beyond them to find the first principle of the whole, and clinging to this and then to that which depends on this by successive steps, she descends again without the aid of any sensible object from ideas through ideas, and in ideas she ends. I understand you, he replied, not perfectly, for you seem to me to be describing a task which is really tremendous. But at any rate, I understand you to say that knowledge and being which the science of dialectic contemplates are clearer than the notions of the arts as they are termed, which proceed from a hypothesis only. These are only contemplated by the understanding and not by the senses, yet because they start from hypotheses and do not ascend to a principle, those who contemplate them appear to you not to exercise the higher reason upon them, although when a first principle is added to them, they are cognized by the higher reason, and the habit which is concerned with geometry and the cogent sciences. And I suppose that you would term understanding and not reason as being intermediate between opinion and reason. Socrates goes on to say, you have quite conceived my meaning, I said. And now, corresponding to these four divisions, let there be four faculties in the soul. Reason answering to the highest, understanding to the second, faith or conviction to the third, and perception of shadows to the last, and let there be a scale of them. And let us suppose that several faculties have clearness in the same degree that their objects have truth. I understand, he replied, and I give my assent, and I accept your arrangement. And now, I said, let me show you in a figure how far our nature is enlightened or unenlightened. Behold, human beings living in an underground cave. Okay, here we go. Hold on, wait a minute. This is actually a perfect place.
Speak the charm of
Wizards, Freemasons, astrology, tarot. Find all this and more at the Arnemancy Podcast. Host Reverend Eric, that's me, interviews scholars, authors, and eccentric occult personalities diving into a wide range of esoteric topics. Find the Arnemancy Podcast at arnemancy.com or anywhere that podcasts are distributed. That's arnemancy.com. ARNEMANCY. Arnemancy.com.
This month in the Fulgore Correspondentia, we have an Armor of God illustration for our spiritual warfare episodes. There's an updated brief timeline of Genesis, according to me, and the wrong son, wrong blessing, wrong curse graphic, since we are still working through Esau and Jacob. There's a tarot card preview and also the February Abra fast schedule. We're doing another fast cycle in February. If you want to get the dates, go ahead and hit that up. All you got to do is sign into the mailing list and receive the Fulgar Correspondentia. The Fellowcraft episode is the UFO Conspiracy Part 2. We are continuing to dissect the work of classic conspiracy theorist Milton William Cooper. All you got to do is sign up for the $3 tier on Patreon or Subscribestar.
Learn more at abracast.com. Get bonus content by signing up for the mailing list. Get all that plus many exclusive episodes by supporting the show at patreon.com or subscribestar.com.
Hey, and if you have signed into the the mailing list, recently you should be good. But if you were a long time subscriber to the mailing list, you might want to check to see, because a few months ago I had a tragic accident with my mailing list, and there must have been over 300 email addresses that got lost. So if you're like, hey, I haven't heard from the newsletter in a while, you might want to double check. And I can't manually add them in since the accident. So if you're like, what is he talking about, this mailing list? I haven't received it in quite some time. You might want to just double check and re-sign in. Like I said, you have to manually do it. So yeah, there you go. I haven't talked about it in a while because it's fucking heartbreaking, dude. It's goddamn heartbreaking. Okay, so we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of this thing. Okay, here we go. Back to it. And now, I said, let me show you in a figure how far our nature is enlightened or unenlightened. And behold, the human beings living in an underground cave, which has a mouth open towards the light and reaching all along the cave. Here they have been from their childhood and have their legs and necks chained so they cannot move, and can only see before them, being prevented by the chains from turning around their heads. Above and behind them is a fire blazing at a distance, and between the fire and their prisoners there is a raised way, and you will see, if you look, how low wall built along the way, like the screen which marionette players have in front of them, over which they show puppets. I see. And do you see, I said, men passing along the wall carrying all sorts of vessels? Oh. And statues and figurines of animals made out of wood and stone and various materials, which appear all over this wall. Some of them are talking, others silent. You have shown me a strange image, and they are strange prisoners. Like ourselves, I replied, and they see only their own shadows or the shadows of another, which the fire throws on the opposite wall of the cave. True, he said, how could they see anything but the shadows if they were never allowed to move their heads? And of the objects which are being carried in the like manner, would they only see the shadows? Yes, he said. And if they were able to converse with one another, would they not suppose that they were naming what is actually before them? Very true. And suppose further that the prison had an echo which came from the other side. Would they not be sure to fancy when one of the passerbyers spoke at the voice which they heard come from the passing shadow? No question, he replied. Here we go. To them, I said, the truth would be literally nothing but the shadow of the images. God, hello. This is like CNN, your phone's ringing. That is certain. And now look again and see what will naturally flow if prisoners are released or disabused of their error at first, when any of them is liberated and compelled silently to stand up and turn his neck round and walk and look towards the light. He will suffer sharp pains. The glare will distress him, and he will be unable to see the realities of which in his former state he had seen the shadows. And then conceive someone saying to him that what he saw before was an illusion, but that now, when he sees is approaching nearer to being, and his eye is turned towards a more real existence, he has a clearer vision. What will be his reply? And you may further imagine that his instructor is pointing to the objects as they pass by and requiring him to name them. Will he not be perplexed? Will he not fancy the shadows which he formerly saw are truer than the objects which are shown to him now? far truer. And if he is compelled to look straight at the light, will he not have a pain in his eyes, which will make him turn away and take refuge in the objects of vision which he can see, and which he will conceive to be in reality clearer than the other things which are now being shown to him? True, he said. And suppose once more that he is reluctantly dragged up a steep and rugged ascent, and held fast until he is forced into the presence of the sun himself. Is he not likely to be pained and irritated? When he approaches the light, his eyes will be dazzled, and he will not be able to see anything at all of what are now called realities. Not at all in a moment, he said. He will require to grow accustomed to the sight of the upper world, and he will see the shadows best next to the reflections of men and other objects in the water, and then the objects themselves. Then he will gaze upon the light of the moon and the stars and the spangled heavens, and he will see the sky and the stars at night better than the sun or the light of the sun by day. Certainly. Last of all, he will be able to see the sun and not mere reflections of him in the water, but he will see him in his own proper place and not in another, and he will contemplate him as he is, certainly. He will then proceed to argue that this is he who gives the season and the years, and is the guardian of all that is in the visible world, and is in a certain way the cause of all things which he and his fellows have been accustomed to behold. Clearly, he said, he would first see the sun and then the reason about him. And when he remembered his old habitation and the wisdom of the cave and his fellow prisoners, do you not suppose that he would felicitate himself on the change and then pity them? Certainly he would. And if they were in the habit of conferring honors among themselves on those who were the quickest to observe the passing shadows and to remark which of them went before and which followed after and which were together, and who were therefore best able to draw conclusions as to the future, do you think that he would care for such honors and glory, or envy the possessors of them? Would he not stay with Homer, better to be poor servant of a poor master, and to endure anything rather than to think as they do and live after their manner? Yes, he said, I think that they would rather suffer anything than entertain these false notions and live in this miserable manner. Imagine once more, I said, such a one coming suddenly out of the sun to be replaced in his old situation. Would he not be certain to have his eyes full of darkness? To be sure, he said. And if there was a contest, and he had to compete in measuring the shadows with the prisoners who had never moved out of the cave while his sight was still weak, and before his eyes had become steady, and by the time which would be needed to acquire this new habit of sight might be considerable. Would he not be ridiculous? Men would say of him that he went up and down and became without his eyes, and that it was better not even to think of ascending. Man, that's powerful. Seeing the truth, not worth ascending. If anyone tried to lose another and lead up to the light, let them only catch the offender and they would put him to death. No question, he said. This entire allegory, I said, you may now append, dear Glaucon, to the previous argument. The prison house is the world of sight. The light of the fire is the sun. And you will not misapprehend me if you interpret the journey upwards to be the ascent of the soul into the intellectual world according to my poor belief, which at your desire I have expressed. Whether rightly or wrongly, God knows. But whether true or false, my opinion is that in the world of knowledge, the idea of good appears last of all, and is seen only with an effort. And when seen is also interfered the universal author of all things beautiful and right, the parent of light. And of the Lord of light in this visible world. And let the immediate source of reason and truth in the intellectual, that this is the power upon which he would act rationally, either in a public or private life, must have his eyes fixed. I agree, he said, as far as I am able to understand you. Thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. Let's see. I'm not going to attach it to anything, but if you're interested in the allegory of the cave, go to YouTube and search it. There's this really cool claymation. I think it's a claymation video that goes through the prisoners in the cave, seeing the shadow play. It's very interesting. Anyhow, like I said, I'm not going to link it anywhere. I don't know who did it. I can't accredit them or anything, but if you're interested, find it. Let me know what you think. Thank you guys for listening to the show. I got a cool Friday episode. It's huge. I got a huge Friday interview coming up. I don't want to blow it, so I'm not going to mention anything, but yeah. Okay, cool. Here you go. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Send an email or visit us on social media to let us know what you think about this topic. And please remember to leave a 5-star rate and review.
Imagine prisoners that have spent their entire lives chained deep inside a cave. They have been chained so that they cannot see behind themselves, and they are forced to stare endlessly at the cave wall in front of them. Behind them, a fire is burning, and between the prisoners and the fire is a raised walkway. Now imagine that each day a menagerie of objects crosses the walkway. Animals and people carrying their wares to market. Their shapes create an intricate shadow play on the wall in front of the prisoners. This is the only world that the prisoners have ever known.
San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities, the El Paso, Las Cruces communities, Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But we are concerned about trouble and trending irresponsible, one-sided news stories
plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The shadows and the echoes of unseen objects.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish fake stories simply aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 Now, imagine that a prisoner is released. After some time adjusting to the blinding light, the freed prisoner will begin to experience the world outside of the cave for the very first time. And it is like nothing he could have ever imagined. With his new perception of the world, the man will of course want to return to his friends to share his incredible discoveries. But the prisoners cannot recognize their old friend. He appears as all things do. His voice is a distorted echo, and his body is a grotesque shadow. They cannot understand his fantastic stories of the world outside of the cave. To them, it will never exist. This, of course, does not make the world outside of the cave any less real.
If your email inbox is out of control and you've given up sorting it out, a Baltimore company thinks it has a solution for you. Could this be the end of email overload?
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 Could this be the end of your email overload?
Could this be the end of 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 that email overload?
Could this be the end of 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 email overload?
Could this be the end to email overload?
Could this be the end of 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 email overlord? 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 Overlord?
Hey, did you learn something? Did you laugh? Supporting me is a way for you to be a part of the Advercast and ensure its growth and sustainability. It also means I can create a normal schedule for shows and bonus shows, as well as the exclusive Fellow Craft episodes. By supporting the show, you are not only a listener, but you are a part of the show. You supporting the show gives me a way to offer fun rewards as a thank you for showing your appreciation and support for our projects. Do you have an idea for a reward that you don't see? Let me know. My supporters are my partners. I currently pay for you to listen to the Advercast. Not only do I pay the hosting bills out of my own pocket, I volunteer my time and talent to each and every episode of the Advercast. the price of books, the time and resources of reading and researching, the massive amounts of gin and tonic needed, the equipment it takes to record the shows, the time and resources it takes to create the bonus material, and the cost to maintain the internet presence. Is it worth your support? I don't know. I'm proud of the Abercast, and I feel like I'm improving all the time. In addition to creating the show that you dig and that you are excited about, I also have a full-time commitment and other obligations. So why financial support? All of the supporters help me focus my time on the quality and development of the podcast. And what if you can't afford, $1 or $3 or $10 or whatever a month? Believe me, I get that. There are many degrees of support, but if you can't support the show financially, please consider leaving a 5-star rate and review on your preferred podcast app. And don't forget that you could sign into the mailing list and still unlock a lot of bonus content. Thank you. I cannot put into words how much it means to me that you listen to the show each time I post a new episode. Your feedback, support, and love of the stories that we talk about here is what keeps me going.